This is a WKYT podcast.
Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Down the stretch they come toward Election Day. Even though most Kentuckians may have already voted in the high-stakes 2020 election, many are expected to show up at the polls on Tuesday. Then we'll await clarity up and down the ballot, and those political ads will be off of your TV screen. One of the most fascinating races in central Kentucky right now is the Republican Congressman Andy Barr working to hold off a challenge from Democratic challenger Josh Hicks. We're going to talk to both candidates this morning. Later we'll hear from candidate Hicks, but we will begin with Congressman Barr, who is making a case for re-election. Congressman, first of all, with this early voting, I mean, do you know really what to expect in terms of how it may turn out and when we'll know the answer to who's won?
Well, we don't know. We may hear a little bit sooner just because so many ballots have already been cast through absentee balloting and also a big surge in early in-person voting, which I'm encouraging. If people know how they're going to vote, go ahead and do that. Do yourself a favor and vote early. You'll have a chance to continue to vote early on Monday before Election Day on Tuesday. Obviously, we expect very long lines on Election Day itself because, of course, the tremendous interest in this election, and the stakes are very high, of course, but also because we have fewer in-person physical voting locations. So if you know how you're going to vote, we encourage folks to go ahead and cast their vote in person early.
Congressman, before we launch into some of the ongoing issues out there, how different has this campaign been for you? The pandemic has meant no big gatherings like you've done in your previous runs for office. You like to go county to county and hold those events, and you've been without your wife, Carol, whom you lost just as this race was getting started.
Obviously, that's been tough on the family. I've spent more time at home prioritizing the kids. That always has been my priority, and that's the most important thing. We are very blessed to have a lot of family that help out and allow me to get out and about. There's a lot more Zoom and video conference and conference calls as opposed to in-person, physical meetings with people, no large rallies or crowds. But we still continue to get out there with masks, social distancing. We're careful. We have smaller gatherings and we space out. But I still think it's important that we do that. Yesterday I was on the road. I started the day in Estill County, went to Madison County. I was there with Senator Mitch McConnell for an event. And then I traveled on to Camargo, to the Town and Country Store, which I love to visit with folks out there in Montgomery County. And then we traveled to Menifee, Wolfe County, and we ended the evening in Winchester. So a big and busy day in the district, but we were careful the whole way through.
Your opponent has worked hard to make health care central to this campaign, certainly with this pandemic. Do you think that is much of what's on the minds of voters this election season as we're in this situation?
Naturally, that's true. I think the pandemic, the virus, also the economy and jobs, that's front in mind with everyone. And I think defeating the virus is interconnected to getting the American people fully back to work. We got a great jobs report and growth report. 2/3 of the growth has come back since those very serious lockdowns in March, April, and May. So that's good news, but we have to keep that V-shaped recovery going. And ultimately, that is interconnected to the healthcare situation. We've got to get a vaccine, a safe and effective vaccine. And we're well on our way with Operation Warp Speed, the billions of dollars that I voted for to help the pharmaceutical companies develop safe and effective vaccines. And they're moving through the process very effectively with the gold standard of FDA approval process. I think 4 vaccines now in phase 3 clinical trials. And we're ramping up the production of those vaccines so that we'll have 300 million doses when the FDA approves a vaccine, we think early 2021. But we're very proud of the record on healthcare in countering and confronting this public health crisis, from delivering personal protective equipment to local area hospitals and nursing homes, expanding telemedicine services to keep our healthcare workers safe, and also to conserve scarce personal protective equipment, ramping up domestic manufacturing of medical equipment, onshoring that manufacturing, supporting the Project Air Bridge, which brought more personal protective equipment back to the United States to help our frontline healthcare workers. The fact that we voted for therapies and treatments and gave all Americans free COVID testing. We've really ramped up testing in this country. We've got over 1 million tests being done every single day in this country. And like I said before, with Operation Warp Speed, we are on the cusp, on the verge of one of the most significant biomedical and pharmaceutical achievements in human history, with a vaccine that will get our economy going again, frankly, and reopen the economy.
Let me ask you about that, the vaccine, as people, are so eager for that and trying to look around the corner and hope that that is the answer here and that things quickly get better. If a vaccine does come, do you think that Congress would have to take a vote on whether that is to be administered universally, or would it be strictly voluntary, or do you think that would be something done at the White House level?
I would support voluntary, but I think we should lead by example and encourage, as long as it goes through the FDA gold standard approval process and everything checks out, we will need to vaccinate the frontline healthcare workers and the doctors and the hospital and nursing home workers first, and the first responders. I think there will be public acceptance of that process.
Could you vote to make it mandatory if that came before you?
I don't think we'll need to. I think there'll be enough confidence in the process, and I do have confidence in the process. I've been briefed by the FDA and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. There are no cut corners here. We're just doing things concurrently as opposed to sequentially like it's done otherwise. We're accelerating the timetable, but we're not cutting corners. So I think it's going to be safe and effective when there is ultimately an approval. And we'll have dosage levels that will allow us to deploy this on mass scale in ways that other vaccines don't have. And the reason for that is, frankly, the votes that I cast in Congress to provide literally tens of billions of dollars in this heroic public-private partnership between the taxpayers and the pharmaceutical industry. And they're competing with one another. So this is the best of American ingenuity. It's very frustrating to hear politicians criticize the response to the coronavirus pandemic when this is literally going to be one of the most incredible achievements in human medical history.
You made reference to the economy and some glimmers of hopeful signs out there, but it's still a tough situation for a lot of Kentuckians. Are you surprised that there has been no second economic stimulus package passed, given the toll the pandemic has taken on the economy?
Yes, and it's so frustrating that Speaker Pelosi continues to block sensible liability protections that would allow small businesses to reopen. We don't need trial lawyers suing small businesses right in the middle of a pandemic. We don't need trial lawyers suing heroic doctors and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies trying to provide vaccine and treat patients. That's the last thing we need. We need another stimulus bill that will block these trial lawyers from suing everybody in the middle of a pandemic. And we need to reload the very successful Paycheck Protection Program that my opponent, for whatever reason, criticizes. This was a lifeline. I voted for transparency. I helped create this program, and not only did I encourage, as the oversight head on the Financial Services Committee over Treasury, encourage greater transparency. I voted to provide a lifeline to over 50,000 Main Street small businesses. These weren't big companies. These were Main Street small businesses. I was on the road yesterday, and I had a convenience store owner, I had a restaurant owner, I had a small tool and die company manufacturer. We saved millions of jobs across this country, and these are middle-class jobs that we saved. And for whatever reason, the critics out there don't understand that the program is called the Paycheck Protection Program. It doesn't go to donors. It doesn't go to CEOs. It goes to workers that allows them to keep them on the payroll. The only way that these loans get forgiven is if the loans were used to keep people on the payroll and keep them off of unemployment. And it was extraordinarily successful. That's why we need another round. We need to move past this election so that Speaker Pelosi stops blocking another round of relief while we're waiting for this vaccine.
Congressman,
really important.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The opioid crisis, which has been such a challenge for Kentucky, appears to have gotten worse during the pandemic. Do we have the kind of sustained effort underway in the state that we can address this and bring it under control?
Well, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, we announced another round of grants to local area addiction recovery services from the rural development and USDA money that I voted for, both in the Farm Bill and appropriations, but also in the CARES Act, the first round of coronavirus relief funds. I have a bill that would facilitate better rural broadband connectivity using the coronavirus relief funds so that we can have better addiction recovery services online during the pandemic. But clearly we've seen an uptick, and last week we hosted the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the White House drug czar, right here in the 6th Congressional District, where we visited with the HIDTA task force that I've secured for the district in Madison, in Montgomery, in Powell, and in Clark counties. And we met with these law enforcement officers that are getting help from the federal government now to keep these poisons out of our communities. We also met with our recovery working group that I started. I convened all of the area faith-based and not-for-profit groups that are serving people in addiction recovery. And we're bringing federal grants to the district, most prominently the $87 million healing grant for the University of Kentucky. I facilitated a meeting between the investigators and researchers at UK that are going to use this grant to reduce overdose mortality by 40% in 4 years. And they met with the drug czar, Jim Carroll, when he was in the district with me last week. So we've laid the groundwork. Now we just need to make sure that we defeat the virus so we can bring these people back together and get them better services. But in the next term of Congress, I want to focus on funding the bill that I passed last Congress, which is the Career Act, which provides for transitional housing for addiction recovery. We need more funding for that. And I was meeting with the Isaiah House in Versailles. They're opening a new facility for women in recovery. They need more long-term transitional housing. I'm working across the aisle in the Financial Services Committee with Congressman Scott from Georgia about how to also reimagine the Section 8 voucher program to connect it with addiction recovery services, with job training services. So we're not just warehousing people in addiction, we're giving them the treatment and the counseling services and the job training that they need for long-term recovery.
Congressman, I'll let you answer that fully. Let me just ask you now, with a few seconds left, over the next couple of days, ahead of the vote on Tuesday, what do you do to try to win in the 6th District again?
Well, we continue to get out the vote. We know a lot of my supporters are wanting to vote near the election and on election day. We just want to make sure that they know that they're going to have to wait in some lines, but we think they're very, very motivated. That's what we're hearing. We're getting great feedback about the fact that we're getting results. I've always said that if you do the job you're elected to do, then the politics will take care of itself. People appreciate our response to the virus, our leadership role on the committee at the center of the economy, and the forgivable loan program that I've led to expand and will continue to fight, and the middle class tax cuts that I voted for. And they see the leadership that we're providing on the China task force to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for causing this terrible pandemic, for enabling its spread, and for their disinformation campaign. We're going to, in the next Congress, work on implementing the 400 recommendations to not only hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, but to prepare the United States for the coming competition with the Chinese Communist Party. We need to bring more jobs back to the United States, onshore our manufacturing capabilities, and prepare to defend ourselves, both in terms of our national security and our economic security, from the very aggressive policies and posturing of the Chinese Communist Party.
Congressman, that's our time. Thank you very much for being with us. Had to cut you off like I guess happens on the floor sometimes. We appreciate you being with us. And we will be back in just a moment, and Democratic candidate Josh Hicks will join us here on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. And we welcome you back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. Earlier, we heard from Republican Congressman Andy Barr, who is seeking his 5th term in Washington. Now his challenger, Democrat Josh Hicks, is joining us. Hicks has run a populist-style campaign trying to appeal to those who may feel their concerns are ignored in Washington. Hicks is a former Marine and police officer who went to law school and is now a Lexington attorney. Josh Hicks joining us now. Mr. Hicks, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you as always, Bill. A pleasure to be on with you all.
You know, before I launch into the issues of this race, here we are at the end, and it's never easy to do this kind of thing. You and Mr. Barr both had family health issues that have come along, and how difficult has this race been for you to run during this pandemic when you've had to try to introduce yourself to voters without being able to really meet with them and share some conversations and handshakes and so forth, the kind of things that it takes to get to know people? You've had to do this with a mask on and 6 feet apart.
Yes, sir. And I'll tell you, any struggles that I have had in this campaign are far secondary to the struggles that the average Kentuckian is facing, not only from the beginning of this pandemic, but here we are rapidly approaching November, and we're watching the cases rise. We're still seeing too many deaths. We're watching the cases rise across the United States. And so any struggle that I've had, it has been secondary to the struggle that people who are now unemployed or have lost their health insurance have been facing. And so really it's bolstered my resolve to do everything I can to try to get someone back in Washington, D.C. that's not going to brag about things that happened in March or April, not going to brag about accomplishments from years ago, but is going to sit down and do the serious work that has to be done and is currently being ignored in Washington, D.C., so that folks around here who are seeing little or nothing, who are seeing, their small businesses dry up and blow away, who are seeing their health care gone, who are seeing the attacks on their health care if they have pre-existing conditions. But those are the folks that I keep in the forefront of my mind. And any struggles I have, secondary to theirs.
But do you feel that you have been able to adequately introduce yourselves to people to an extent that they have a comfort level with you in being their representative and somebody that they could reach out to if they had questions about the federal government and to be their voice in Washington?
I believe so, Bill. I believe so. And we've put people's safety at the forefront of this campaign from the first of the pandemic. But we've still been able to be out. We've still been able to have small meetings and small gatherings and still be there and show up and do the work of learning about each unique county in this district to find their challenges and the opportunities. So I do feel like we've had a good opportunity to introduce ourselves and to talk about how we can be a voice for them in Washington, D.C.
Do you think the federal government response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been adequate?
No, sir, I do not. I think it's been a failure, not only at the political level, where this virus itself became the subject of political rhetoric and divided along political lines, but also the relief that was passed back in March and April is gone now. Those loans are spent. The unemployment relief is gone. The things that were done have now expired. And unfortunately, we're still suffering under the consequences of a failed federal response, not just politically, but legislatively as well. And so there's a lot of folks out here struggling and wondering if anybody is going to get back to work for them.
Let's talk about the reality of passing an economic stimulus package. And there's a lot of criticism that has not happened, a second round. Barr in the House and Senator Mitch McConnell say that the Democratic House bill is full of unrelated goodies. Would you be able to go and vote for something that goes outside the scope of fighting the coronavirus if that's what you were presented with by House leadership?
Well, first and foremost, I would fight to make it a unique relief that would reach where it needs to reach for small businesses, for unemployed people, for folks who have lost their health insurance, for folks who were already struggling to get by before the pandemic came along. And I would want to be a part of doing that. And in fact, Bill, I'm the only one in this race who's going to have that opportunity. As someone who would go and join a majority, I have the opportunity to influence what that next bill looks like. If we send our current guy back to Washington, D.C., he's going to be excluded in the minority, sucking up corporate PAC checks. I want to go and fight for Kentuckians in the majority so that I can shape a better bill coming out of this. But secondary to that, what they say about economic stimulus when you're talking about McConnell and Barr, I have a hard time believing anything they say. The amount of lies and rhetoric that have been tossed around for political gain doesn't serve a single Kentuckian who is struggling right now.
Barr recounted to us in the interview just previous to this that he said that he has gone around to a lot of small businesses that benefited from the initial stimulus package that was passed back in the spring and summer, and said that it is wrong to say that it is only for big business, that there are small businesses here in the 6th District that this has been the difference in them being able to keep the doors open or not. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that I have seen many more small businesses that I have been to and visited with that either never got the relief in the first place, or that relief is now long gone and they're facing a long, dark winter without anything in place to help them. And moreover, I've talked to many more agricultural producers all across this district who got absolutely no relief, who lost 60% of their income on their agricultural piece because farmers markets were unable to operate like they had. And those folks never got anything at all. So what I've been focused on, Bill, are the folks who feel like their federal government, their federal leadership has failed them, because what I want to do, take the pieces that have already worked, continue those, but find all the failings, find all the ways that it didn't help so that I can be better starting in January of 21.
Mr. Hicks, the opioid crisis appears to have gotten worse during the pandemic. People are in more despair. They're in many cases separated from the treatment they were able to get before everything hit. Do you have an idea of how the federal government, in a sustained way, can assist Kentucky in fighting what is a real scourge on the state?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And it begins with your federal government not being full of bought and paid for politicians by Big Pharma. As you know all too well, Bill, I've called on my opponent to return money he accepted from Purdue Pharma. He has flatly said no, he's not going to do that. So first of all, we have to have politicians that aren't bought and paid for. But on the policy side, we have to find funding for, after we hold these bad actors, these bad pharmaceutical companies accountable, we find funding for sustainable rehabilitation programs that are local in our communities, that are results-based, that are reaching out and providing after services so that folks have a chance not only to heal their addiction, but then to move forward and rebuild their life from there. It's going to be a crucial part of economic development all across rural Kentucky.
If a vaccine comes, would you, and it were to come before Congress to determine if people have to take it, would you make its use universal, that everybody was compelled to get the vaccine, or would you favor that being strictly voluntary?
As somebody who served in the Marine Corps and was volunteered for the anthrax vaccine that was offered back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I hesitate to say one way or the other, but I will say this: everyone should get this vaccine. If we get a vaccine and it's safe and the testing is widely available, everyone should get this vaccine. We are not going to get back to normal, either public health wise or economically, until we defeat this virus. And I think that's of paramount importance.
But there's a strong difference in a suggestion that people take it and actually voting to make it law that they do that. Would you vote yes if that came before you?
If the bill was just that, Bill, if the bill was just, hey, everybody's going to get this vaccine, as someone who got the anthrax vaccine in the United States Marine Corps, I probably would vote for it.
Lexington's about 40% of this district. The rest is in the large and the small suburbs and in the smaller towns and in the countryside surrounding that. To get the kind of math you would need to win, where does your vote need to come from as those vote totals come in?
Well, I hope it comes from all over this district, Bill. I hope our talk and our priorities being focused on putting the people of Kentucky first before corporate special interests, I hope they come from everywhere. Obviously, we would like to see a big turnout here in Lexington. Would love to see a big turnout from some of the eastern Kentucky counties that are either I call home there in Fleming or are close to where I call home. But we want to make sure that we've reached out to every single voter, whether they feel disaffected, whether they feel like they have somebody working for them, whether they feel like their voice is heard. We want to make sure we've reached out to everybody, because everybody matters. And I want to represent the entire district, not just the portions that I need to get elected.
What has this experience been like for you? You've run one political campaign before and came up just short. That was for a state house seat. What has running for Congress in central Kentucky been like for you?
Well, there has been a lot of good, because I've met a lot of wonderful people and have gotten to connect with a lot of folks who made me more and more determined to go to work for them. Because whether it's the teacher in Nicholas County, sad that her students don't have broadband access to be able to do their homework, or whether it's somebody living out in a part of this district, say Frenchburg, that is looking for an agricultural center to help stimulate the agricultural economy there. I've talked to folks all over this district, and it's really reinforced for me how important it is that we have folks who care, have some compassion, have some empathy, and want to go to work for and put public service at the forefront. It's been difficult, of course, watching some of the attack ads and watching some of the lies told about me on television. But Bill, unfortunately, that's where our politics are right now. And until we can change that and get back to requiring truth and integrity from our elected officials, it's just what we're going to have to put up with.
What do you do the next couple of days here before the election? Do you are you urging people to take advantage of the vote on Monday so that there are not lines maybe on Tuesday?
Yes, sir, absolutely. In fact, if anybody's watching this and hasn't gone and voted in person yet, please go. Please try Saturday. Please go on Monday. Please go and get out early, not only so you can have your voice heard and exercise your constitutional right, but so you can get out there and beat the crowds. I'm worried we're going to see big crowds on Election Day. I want everybody to vote. But what I'm going to do, I am going to be trying to find places where I can still go and safely connect with voters. Unfortunately, we're seeing these counties in the red all over the place, so we're going to do it safely. But it's still important that we reach everybody we can before the final bell rings.
Josh Hicks, Democratic candidate for Congress, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
And stay with us. We'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. So we are now just a couple of days away from Election Day itself. Many people have turned in absentee ballots already. Many Kentuckians have voted early in person. Secretary of State Michael Adams has released his projections for the year, and he expects 70% of registered voters will be casting a ballot here in 2020. If that happens, it would be the highest turnout since 1992. At GoVoteKY.com, you can look at sample ballots, find polling places, along with checking your voter registration. Again, that is at GoVoteKY.com. Now be sure to join us on election night on Tuesday evening. Of course, throughout the day we'll have voting trends, and then that evening on WKYT and on the CW Lexington we'll have special election coverage, and on all of our platforms including WKYT.com and our Facebook page. That's Kentucky Newsmakers. Thank you for joining us, and have a good week ahead.